Hi guys, welcome to my January 2024 book recap. I read 10 books this month. Some I loved, some I hated. So let's just get into it. I would also like to say that I may love books you guys hate. I may hate books you guys love. So everybody's opinion is different and that's okay. So this was my TBR shelf I set for myself this month. Actually, it was less, but I ended up purchasing books and reading them along the way. I read all of these except for the sequel, The Divine Rivals, and we'll get into why in a second. Also, this will be a part of the February recap. Guys, this is my best book of 2024 so far. Expectedly, Sarah J. Maas is my favorite author and has been since I was 15. But again, February recap. Okay, I had to go get my phone because I have the exact date that I finished books, the exact date and time on my phone. I've been doing this since 2015 and it helps me keep track. Like, I don't know if you guys can see that. We started out 2024 with Divine Rivals, which I finished on January 3rd, 2024 at 3:35 a.m. I ended up reading this in one sitting. And not because it was phenomenal, it was because I hated it. And I had already dedicated too much time to it, so I was like, I have to finish this. This is sold as a fantasy, and to be honest with you, I think that she should have just sold it as a romance because there was really like no fantasy plot in this like I was expecting. I thought literally they were like pen pals. Iris and Roman, they're kind of like pen pals for most of this book. They were enemies though at work. I don't know why I hated this, but I really did. I think I rated this like 2 stars or something. Lacking the fantasy plot. And for me, it's like if it's a romantasy, I want the fantasy part. I want a plot there and not just romance. Like, just wasn't for me. Speaking of how much I love fantasy, this was my second book of 2024 and was definitely a good redemption after a terrible start to 2024 book. This book was amazing. I'm a huge fan of Cassandra Clare's Mortal Instruments series. I got into it when I was in 7th grade, I think. I read the main series and then she came out with prequels and sequels and more prequels. This book was very different for her. So basically, our main character in this, his name is Kel, and he is an orphan. And towards the beginning of the book, the royal family picks him up because he holds resemblance to the crown prince, the same age, whatnot, and he grows up in the palace as the sword catcher. So basically in incidents where they think the prince's life could be in danger or he's sick, but he still needs to be there, Kel goes and he appears like he's the prince to kind of protect him. And over the years, they become best friends. They're best friends. And this is cool because it's very plot driven. There's a wee bit of romance in this. I'm kind of a fan of this one couple. I don't want to spoil it, but I'm kind of a fan of this one couple just because she absolutely hates him. And I love when, you know, they hate each other and then like they fall in love, like, or it's like a hate. Oh my gosh, I love it. I rated this 4 stars. This was one of my favorite books of January and I am so looking forward to the sequel on this. My nails actually kind of match this, so that's kind of nice. All right, the next book that I finished in January was Magnolia Parks. I finished this January 9th at 4:36 a.m. and I did start this book end of 2023. I just ended up reading a couple books in between starting and finishing it. This gave me After vibes, kind of, you know, Tessa and Hardin, how they kind of go back and forth, but kind of in a Gossip Girl type setting. If Tessa and Hardin were Gossip Girl rich, Serena van der Woodsen rich, that would be this book. And for me, I just don't love when couples go back and forth like this, but I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it the way I hated Divine Rival. This book leaves off on a cliffhanger. I've heard it gets better. I think I ended up rating this 3 stars, so not too bad. The next book I finished was Throne of the Fallen. I finished this January 12th at 2:11 a.m. Are you guys seeing a pattern? I finish books in the middle of the night. I read this book in one sitting and I remember that because I was supposed to go live and I just could not put it down. So I ended up skipping my live and other obligations just to read this book because Kingdom of the Wicked is one of my favorite series. I love Amelia and Wrath, and so I was so excited to get to go back into that world. But in this book, our main characters are Prince Envy and Camilla, and it's kind of interesting to see how their dynamic is compared to, you know, Wrath and Amelia. And for me, I do prefer Wrath and Amelia. You know, the ending of Kingdom of the Feared, which I don't want to spoil if people haven't heard, but what Amelia ended up being in that. So, and actually there's a plot twist in this too. Camilla is not who you think she is, and I was shocked, honestly, by the ending of this. So I did rate this 4.5 stars. I loved this book. I could not put this one down. Y'all, we have a very special guest. Aries Wren, you want to say hello? He's a book hater because when I'm reading, I'm ignoring him and I'm not giving him the attention. Oh, he just put his tongue in my mouth. I'm not giving him the attention that he so deserves, right? Is that our problem with books? In this book, I felt like the love story was very rushed. I just didn't feel a lot of connection there. The male lead in this was pretty fatuous. It's almost kind of childlike. The main character in this, Haro, she kind of seduces him in a way. It feels wrong because he's in the body of an adult man who's attractive, but his mannerisms are very childlike in such a way it feels strange to read. Our female lead, Haro, she's boring and she doesn't have much personality. And like I said, she's kind of irritating. What's redeemable about this book is there was a fantasy plotline. Unlike in Divine Rivals, there was a lot more fantasy. The leader had powers and there was just a lot going on there. There was like a betrayal, shocking. I mean, it was interesting. I rated it 3 stars. Literally the redeeming factor here was the plotline was very prevalent. There was romance, but not too much of it. I just wish the romance there wasn't so rushed and weird. I don't know. The next book I read, The Serpent and the Wings of Night, this one was phenomenal. I finished this one January 17th at 10:38 p.m., so a reasonable time for once. And I really loved this book. This one was definitely plot driven in the fantasy department. It's so unique because this was vampires but done in a different way. Because usually vampires just run fast, they're sparkly. Am I just thinking of Twilight? I don't know. In this they have wings and they can do different things. They have different powers and whatnot. Main character, Aurea, she is a human in this vampire world. And she's competing almost in this Hunger Games type of thing. Instead of being in the Hunger Games, this is called the Kajari. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but basically they volunteer for the Kajari. In return, if they win the Kajari, they get 1 wish from a goddess. There is betrayal in this like no other, which I love to read about when you're shocked and you're on the edge of your seat like, oh my gosh. The romance is just the right amount and you're really rooting for them amongst everything. But the way that this ends with betrayal and, I mean, honestly, my heart was kind of ripped out at the end. And I don't want to destroy it, but Vincent is the name of kind of her parents. So her parents were killed at the beginning and she is adopted by the vampire king Vincent. She is his Achilles heel. Aurea is his Achilles heel because he loves her. And people know, you know, what's better to get at a king than a human child. So this book was just really phenomenal. I didn't realize this, but I did rate this 5 stars at the time. So I think this may have been my 1 5-star book that I read in the first month. If I could recommend one book to read this month, it would be this one. And I'm so excited for the sequel. This next book that I read was almost gonna be my 101st book in 2023, but I ended up holding off until January. I loved it. I finished this book January 20th at 3:22 a.m. Dang, I did not write down my thoughts for this. This is where I started slacking. Yeah, so in the West, there is Queen Sabran, and then Eid is the name of the handmaiden from the Priory of the Orange Tree who goes to care for her, but there's kind of like an underlying motive there, I guess you could say. Sabran is about 28 years old, and she has a duty to wed and bear an heir, a female heir, because some person said when the Berethnet line ends, that is when the Nameless One will return and be a threat to all the kingdoms. In the East, they are very friendly to dragons, and and, you know, they ride dragons. And our character over in the east is named Tanae. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I seriously pronounced her name Tanae, and I don't know how it's pronounced, but all these names, I don't know how they were pronounced. I'm like, this is one of those fantasy books where you're like, Bear net? Like, and you don't know. I was just guessing and going with it the whole time. It's interesting how the different kingdoms have different takes on dragons. In the West, they hate them. In the East, they ride them. These characters across the world their paths end up colliding and meeting each other. And this author had no problem killing off characters. That's all I have to say. No problem with it. I really loved this book. I think I rated this a 4-star. So it was good. This book was unexpectedly so good. And I say unexpectedly because books like this set in a high school just reminds me of my own bad experiences in high school, and I don't like to relive that. But this was so cute. Our main character, Emily, is stuck reliving pretty much the worst day of her life. And I say this because on Valentine's Day, she finds out that her boyfriend is cheating on her. She catches him kissing another girl, and she's forced to kind of relive this day over and over again. And she realizes that every single day, no matter what she does, she runs into this guy, Nick. And so she kind of has to think to herself, why? Basically, she ends up exploring that, and it's really cute. This was really cute. I think I rated this a 5-star too, actually. It's so easy to read. It's less than 300 pages. It's like a little snack book. It's really good. Okay, the next book that I read was Gothicana. I just thought this book was so beautiful. And look at these freaking sprayed edges. So our main character in this, Corvina, her name means raven. She was kind of homeschooled her whole life, and then she gets admitted into this university at 21, so she's starting college kind of late. And there's this professor there that she kind of has a little thing with. I want to say they're kind of drawn to the darkness in each other. That's kind of how it starts. But there's a lot of mystery going around in the castle and missing people and whatnot. I'm sorry if I'm giving you guys the worst description. It's crazy because I read so much that I kind of forget the plot and the names of the characters sometimes. That's why I tried to write down things right after I read the book so I'd remember how to say it, and then I forgot some things, so I'm doing my best here. I love how the beginning of each chapter there's a quote. So chapter 1, here we have Vad is the name of the guy. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Edgar Allan Poe. I love the aesthetic of this book. I loved the story. It was different. It does have a little bit of smut, so beware, it's considered a dark romance, which I love because dark romances don't remind me of my screw-ups in high school. They're so unrealistic that they can't remind you of anything traumatizing in your real life, and that's why I like them. I think I rated this 4 stars. It got a little boring at some parts, and that's why it's lacking the last star. I started this book on January 12th, and I had the highest expectations for this book. I have never read anything Stephen King because I am not a fan of horror. I have enough anxiety as is, so I don't want to like fill my mind with horror, you know? But this wasn't. I like the idea of it. So the concept is essentially our main character, Jake Epping. He gets approached by Al, who owns this burger store. Al basically says, hey, in my storeroom, you can go back in time. And what if we went back in time and we tried to prevent JFK from being assassinated? And there's a lot of good that you can do there. Jake is kind of moved by the idea because he is a teacher, and one of the students in his class wrote this essay about a really harrowing part of his childhood where essentially his mother and, you know, all of his siblings were slaughtered by his father. And so Jake kind of thinks to himself, what if I go back and I can fix that too? I liked the idea of it so much, but his writing, in my opinion, is not the greatest, and it's so boring. Every single page I was proud of myself for finishing because his writing is just boring. I feel he includes a lot of superfluous scenes to bulk up the book when they have no connection really to the plot of the book. I felt the whole plot of the book probably could have been minimized to like 200 pages. The rest of it, to me, I saw as fluff, and I felt he deviated from the idea of the book so much. There wasn't a lot that was pertinent to what's advertised on the back. I just found it to be quite tedious, and I felt it could have been minimized a lot. So I think I rated this 2 stars maybe, and I think that that was a little generous because I absolutely hated this book. I hated this book so much. It's one of the worst books I have ever read in my life. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. And I am looking for book recommendations for just 2024 in general. Something I'm looking forward to is I really want to read the Plated Prisoner series. I just placed an order for Guild. Hopefully for next month's recap, I will have my chair and I can have my library in the back potentially, or maybe I'll switch it around. I don't really know. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe if you have not already. Bye guys!
Too long it hurts to watch your blue eyes fade to gray as you fade.